Good morning and welcome to West Point Women's Aviation webinar. My name is Annie Odom and I have the pleasure and opportunity to host this webinar about the Aviation Branch to all of you future potential aviation officers from West Point. With me I have Lieutenant Colonel Jenness Steele, Jennifer Nixon. Oh, she's full bird colonel now? Yep, okay, full bird colonel. I met her when she was a lieutenant colonel. Jenness Steele, Jennifer Nixon, and Keri Anderson to talk to you about the aviation branch. So a little bit about me. I belong in a museum. I was an OH-58 Delta pilot. I graduated from West Point in 2010 and went straight to flight school and branched 58. My first duty station was at Savannah at Hunter Army Airfield, and I deployed with 3rd ID to Kandahar in 2013. And then spent my last 5 years at Fort Riley, Kansas, where I was an OH-58 Delta Troop Commander, where I basically transitioned a unit from Kiowas to Apaches when the Army retired my airframe. And then I was an ATC Commander at Fort Riley and also the Senior Aviation Planner for the 1st Infantry Division. So that's my background. And my job today is to kind of moderate this talk for all of you and talk about our experiences in Army aviation. So with that being said, I'd like the other panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Colonel Steele.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Colonel Jenness Steele, and I am a Stage 47 pilot, Delta and Fox. I was a maintenance test pilot in the younger years. I have had my commands were, first I started as a platoon leader at the 101st, did time in Korea, was a maintenance platoon leader there back when maintenance platoon leaders and as captains, or in the Chinook community, that we were captains as platoon leaders back in the day. And then, so I did aviation maintenance, platoon leader time. I had actually, as a lieutenant, I did 36 months as a platoon leader and section leader. And then did the test pilot thing, went from Korea to Bragg, spent some time there in the AVIM, and also did the AVIM command as a captain, which is now considered the ASC, and helped stand up what became our ASB type battalion set in Afghanistan in 2003, 2004 with OEF 2 and 3 back to back with Fort Bragg. And then I did ACRC time. I also was a Brigade 4, Battalion XO S3, did 36 months of Battalion XO S3 time at Fort Riley. So that was a lot of time. Then I actually, after going out to ILE, I just did 3 years in Special Operations Command Central as the J3 Air. So I did a lot of special ops planning, worked with a lot of teams over there, and actually worked with a lot of our international partners in their airframes and helping them with their mission sets. Then followed up with Battalion Command at Fort Hood, best job in the Army by far, where I actually had a chance to work with Keri Anderson, who's on the call. There learned a lot, first time in a heavy division. So I've actually done light, medium, and heavy divisions, although I don't think we call it that anymore. Then followed off with Battalion Command with HRC, was the Aviation Enlisted Personnel Manager. And currently right now I'm in DC as a full bird colonel doing the Deputy Director for the Army Safety and Occupational Health community, and which is actually the DC liaison for the Combat Readiness Center at Fort Rucker, Alabama. So I'm happy to talk all of those things as we go through. So pass it over to whoever's next, Annie.
All right, Jenny, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Captain Jenny Nixon here. I graduated West Point in 2010, branching aviation, and went straight to flight school, like we all did. I am a Black Hawk pilot by trade. I started out flying the older model Alpha Limas, which allowed me to go first to Honduras after flight school. So I spent a year and a half there. After that, I moved up to Fort Lewis, Washington, now known as JBLM, where I transitioned over to the newer model, the Mike model of Black Hawks. I spent a couple of years there, did my first tour in Afghanistan with 16th Cab there. Then after the career course, I moved to Kansas, Fort Riley, as apparently everyone in the Army does. where I got the opportunity to be a commander, a flight company commander, and then I worked in the brigade operations shop. So all of my experience has been operational in that I've either been in an S3 shop, an operations shop, or as a direct line leader in a flight company. Been very fortunate for that. So I left active duty in 2018 so that I could go pursue higher education. I just graduated with my MBA from UC Berkeley, where I serve as a reserve. I serve in the reserves as an ROTC instructor. So I moved from the world of aviation, which I love dearly, to teaching cadets here at Berkeley. And that's me.
Awesome. And Keri, go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Hate to follow the other two with their backstories, but again, graduated, went to flight school at Fort Rucker. Following that, I was Alpha Lima Black Hawk pilot, went to Korea and flew there for 2 years, which is an incredible experience. I'd highly recommend for anyone that has the option. Started off in the medevac, even though I'm a 15 series. It was a great opportunity. I got to see the GSAB side before I entered air assault later. Doing medevac, did that for about 1.5 years, and once I made PC, I moved to the maintenance company, which gave me a whole different perspective and appreciation for what goes on behind the scenes of what gets the aircraft into the air and working with soldiers. So again, it's a wonderful opportunity, and if it presents itself, jump on it. Coming from Korea, went to the career course, finished that time up and went to Fort Hood, where if you don't go to Fort Riley, like Jenny, you end up going to Fort Hood. So did my time there. That's where I met now Colonel Steele. She was my battalion commander for a brief period. Once I got there, I was initially on staff, got to learn some of the big picture operational type objectives and things that I didn't see at the battalion level or as, within a company as a platoon leader. Moved into a company command as an air assault pilot / commander. Had a wonderful time getting to work with soldiers again and actually seeing the fruits of the labor of what goes on from the planning at, the brigade and battalion levels. Once command was over, went back to brigade, and I am like Annie, no longer in the military, but went to college, did some prerequisites, and I'm currently in scrubs because I'm working at a vet clinic. So I'm currently 1 year into Purdue Veterinary College's veterinary medicine program and also doing my master's in public health. So 4 more years and, I'll have another profession that, I can call myself a vet. And it's just been great to have the experience with aviation to fall back on in terms of planning and using checklists and just kind of keeping a calm, cool, collected self. So that's me.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for those introductions. We have like a breadth of knowledge and experience here. And it's funny because 3 out of 4 of us were my roommates at West Point. So it's like they lost a bet, know me to be here today. I'm just kidding. But what I like to talk about now are the different airframes. And we have some Black Hawk pilots here. We have a Chinook pilot, and I'll try really hard to talk about the AH-64 and the mission set for that. I'll start off talking about the Apache. So in the Army inventory, we have actually 5 different types of planes, I guess, that you kind of get into. So you have the Apache, the Black Hawk, the Chinook, and then the Lakota, which I'm not really familiar with how you jump out of that from flight school, but that's also in the Army inventory that you can see. And then the C-12, which is like the fixed wing aircraft that you could potentially get rated on when you're in flight school. But the Apache is basically our premier and only attack helicopter platform that we have in the United States Army. It replaced in 2015 the Kiowa, so now it does all attacks and reconnaissance missions, and its primary role is attack, reconnaissance, security, and movement to contact. So you will see an ARB, an Aerial Reconnaissance Battalion, or an ARS, an Aerial Reconnaissance Squadron. And the difference between the two of those is basically an ARB has all Apaches, and usually the Gray Eagle Company, MQ-1, is going to be attached to the ARB, and then the ARS is the Aerial Reconnaissance Squadron, which used to be 30 Kiowas, but now it's 8 Apaches per troop. And then you're also going to see a platoon of Shadows, RQ-7 Bravo, with that to make the ARS ARB. But the mission sets, both the battalion and the squadron are supposed to be good at close combat attack, attack, reconnaissance, and security missions. but obviously with the squadron being focused primarily on reconnaissance and the attack battalion primarily on attack. But when you deploy them into theater, they're both capable to do the same thing. But the AH-64 basically has rockets and missiles on it, and then that big gun at the bottom is the 30-millimeter machine gun. It's capable of basically target acquiring up to 128 targets in less than a minute with all of the threat systems that they have in the aircraft. And it's really a big bad sky tank. So if you think of like the main battle tank in the land, we call it the sky tank, and it's really good at what it does. The newest version of the Apache is the AH-64 Echo that they just rolled out a couple of years ago with Boeing. They're still trying to modernize the fleet now, but basically that's an overview of like what an Apache is and what it does. Most brigades, I mean all brigades should have an attack battalion or a squadron, depending on if it's a heavy or light division. It's going to have both for that. So there's a lot of opportunities to post to different places if you get that airframe. Is there anything I'm missing from anybody talking about like what the Apache is and what it does?
I think the Apache is the most technically complicated to fly, but also that community has a great pride for its airframe. They're very much, they act like the fighter pilots kind of. I mean, they are the fighter pilots of the Army. So it's a very tight-knit community. And I only know 2 women Apache pilots, I think. So I think that we need to get more in there, honestly. Take over that a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are a few female Apache pilots and reconnaissance pilots, and I don't know if this is just a fun fact, but Army aviation attack and reconnaissance platforms were not open to women until 1994. I think that was the first inaugural, or maybe it was 93 or 94. So it is kind of like a still pretty male dominated out of the aviation field, but it's definitely an each your own type A type of community, and it's definitely like that in the Kiowa community. So the only difference now is that we just don't have the little baby birds to go with those Apaches. But for sure it is a very technical airframe, and when we talk about flight school, we'll talk about the times, you know, that how long does it take to get you through the pipeline today in flight school, and the advanced course for the Apache is definitely significantly longer than the other airframes just because it's such a technical platform. Yeah. So with that,
it is very cool technically though, because they have these goggles that just are X-ray through the aircraft. When you sit in there and you put their goggles on, you can just look down and you see what's outside of the aircraft. It's really wild.
Oh my goodness. I feel like that's, yeah. They also make pumpkin spice lattes. I'm kidding. That's a joke. But with that, I think we'll move on to the Chinook and have Colonel Steele tell us a little bit about the CH-47 and all the opportunities with that, and kind of the big brother of all of our aircraft in aviation.
So I would beg to differ on the premier aircraft comment that you said earlier, because not to make you choke on your drink there, Yanni, but the Chinook is the highest demand, most desired airframe out there. Although we are not armed other than for our own self-defense and aerial machine gun, but with that, with our 240s, we have 3 240s that you actually put on the aircraft that are manned by the crew members in the back. They go out either side of the aircraft and off the tail. Sometimes, depending on the cargo that you're flying, you don't necessarily fly with the tail. But I'm going to give a very Army description of the CH-47, and then I will also give a more candid description of the CH-47 and maybe throw 1 or 2 jokes in there for you all, just to keep it lively and not be so official. So the CH-47 is the Army's only heavy lift helicopter. That happened actually as I came into the Army, because I did forget to say earlier that I graduated West Point in 1995. So I am definitely the the old grad on the call. So the Corps has, and it's the only heavy lift, and we transitioned from medium lift to heavy lift when the Army totally retired the Sky Crane. So so the CH-47 has a suite of improved features, such as upgraded digital cockpit featuring the common avionics architecture system, new monolithic airframe with vibration reduction, and digital automatic flight control system, which provides coupled controllability for operations in adverse environments for reduced visibility, brownout, high winds. And the CH-47's common cockpit enables multi-service digital compatibility and interoperability for improved situational awareness, mission performance, survivability, as well as future growth potential. So since 90% of you that were hoping read or listen to this have no idea anything I just said, basically it is a modernized aircraft that when I started flying in the Delta model, we were still dials and pointing things, pointing at the different numbers that we needed to do and watch. But it is now a digital cockpit. So it looks much more advanced. And with that, they were able to digitalize the flight control systems and to help us, fly the aircraft better. Some would say that it flies itself better than some of the pilots fly it. I would say that's one thing. If you do go Chinooks, learn to fly without the system. Be comfortable flying without the system. Too many people rely on the system. I actually had a very hard time transitioning to the system and trusting it. My instructor pilot used to have to make me put my hands on my knees and correct me every time I would try and reach the aircraft controls, other than dialing in and kind of streamlining where we were going, particularly under instruments and because I just, is that the need to feel like I needed to be telling the aircraft what to do. But it has really modernized and become a very smart aircraft, and it's made it much safer. It was the safest airframe even prior to. It just, unfortunately, when Chinook accidents or mishaps, actually is the Army phrase, when Chinook mishaps happen, we tendency have more people on board. So they become more publicized, but it really is a safe aircraft. And we have the mission sets that we do. Well, anyway, so with the digital stuff, it really helps in the brownout situation. So for those of you who don't know what brownout is, it's, flying in either the dirt, the sand, because sometimes just dirt does it. It's not just sand where you brown out. People forget about that sometimes when you're landing into a field that you see grass, but you don't realize how loose the dirt is underneath that grass. Or if you go into a field that has just been cut, you can almost green out with grass from the rotor wash from our aircraft is pretty intense. But you can also white out. So if you're in snow, I had that experience in Korea where we started to white out as we came in with a flight of 8 Chinooks landing into an LZ for an air assault. So it can get pretty interesting as you do that. But the system kind of helps you and do that, keeps the visual cues. It can space ourselves in flight from the other aircraft in front of us and help us fly and stay at the appropriate distance off of each other. But the cooler thing about the Chinook, other than it is probably the best and most fun to fly, and I would definitely say some would say Cadillac. Maybe actually more like the Maserati of nowadays, to modernize our terminology. The Maserati of the Army is we do our mission all the time. So Chinook pilots, unfortunately for the Apache guys, it's great. Unless you're going to war or you're going to the range, you go and you practice and you rehearse your mission, but you don't always get to fly it. But we get to fly the troops or artillery pieces. You can either put them in, sometimes if they're small enough, they go internal. Sometimes they go on our hooks. We have 3 hooks on the bottom. So we do a lot of sling load missions. And then we also can be a forward arming and refuel point for the other aircraft. So we have internal tanks that go inside that carry fuel, and we can push out a FARP and anywhere for them to do it. So, and that doesn't just happen in combat. That happens on training ranges. That happens on field problems. So we're always doing that. We have the combat mission to a humanitarian mission to civil support. So it's definitely a wide range of things, and I have done everything. I've gone to Central America, where we self-deployed from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, down to El Salvador, Nicaragua. So you got to do the whole country crossing and do Hurricane Mitch support in 1998, 99. Again, as I date myself, but probably the best mission I ever did in the Army, because we were really out there helping people. And I will say that I actually, just to kind of add a little bit to it, went back years later on a cruise to Nicaragua and listened to my tour guide talk about how us going and helping in the humanitarian mission and the big helicopters flying around and bringing us stuff from the US changed the opinion of the US population to the Nicaraguan people. So again, it really is an aircraft that you really get after it. And can do all the time. So you can, you know, the standard load that you kind of plan for is about 30 troops, depending on what they're carrying and what else they want to do. You ask them to be light. No soldier travels light, no Chinook pilot travels light. So I will throw that plug in there. If you like to go to the field and be comfortable, we use cots and air mattresses. We can put a refrigerator in the aircraft and do it, but those are the things that as a battalion commander you frowned upon when you knew your crews were doing that. So, and there's plenty of stories there if anybody ever wanted to talk offline about that. But that's, you know, kind of our whole broad spectrum. So you've got the air assault, you've got the mission movement or PAX movements, you have air movements, you have humanitarian, and you have the defense civil support for protecting the United States. So I don't think I missed anything. And we do go to the aero gunnery range. So it's not that we get out of the range. We still go to the range and we still have combat crews. So it's not all lost. And, you know, there is a lot of sexy to the Chinooks because the special operators prefer Chinook over an Apache, because the Apache's not taking them anywhere and they'd have to walk if that's all they got. So I will turn it over to someone else as I show the pride in my big girl aircraft. So
thank you for that. Yeah, we call the Chinook Big Wendy, and everybody that isn't a Chinook pilot wants to be friends with the Chinook pilots on any field problem, because they're usually got their grill out and definitely have a cooler with some cold sodas when everybody else is sticking with MREs, or at least that was my experience. So let's go to Keri. Can you talk a little bit about medevac operations and kind of those things and you know, your experience with assault operations in the Black Hawk?
Absolutely. I just want to preface, I have to get this off my chest. I have Chinook envy, and I wanted to select Chinooks for all the reasons Colonel Steele listed. They're just awesome. I mean, just to see something that can lift itself in the air and still have room to carry more weight, it's impressive. They defy physics. I still haven't figured it out. But the next best being the Black Hawk is also an awesome airframe. And I think just like with the Chinook, just like with bullet aircraft in general, they just have so much variety in the mission set, and that really keeps you on your toes and keeps you from getting bored with the same mission set over and over. So in the medevac, I entered not knowing anything medical or anything, you know, related to the medevac. So that was a learning curve, but they typically have platoons that are set up so that the platoon leader is a captain and they have a section leader who's a lieutenant. So kind of went into the section leader role, and just by means of, you know, personnel turnover was able to take over the platoon early. So that was a great learning experience in terms of leadership, but also, you know, the mission set and learning the different capabilities of the GSAB versus, you know, an assault battalion. It's a great experience that I had in Korea. What we would do was actually pool medevac coverage in the area for both training soldiers and for the local nationals and just civilians in general, doing convenience missions because of traffic congestion. So it'd be a lot faster to get a medevac pilot in the air to the point of injury and to move the patient to a hospital versus waiting in traffic in the back of an ambulance. So we definitely got a lot of flight time, a lot of experience, a lot of on-the-fly mission planning. which is very different from the assault community, as I'll discuss in a bit. And just a lot of on-the-spot thinking and decision-making, which was a really great experience. From there, like I said, made PC, moved to the maintenance company, which is a complete 180 from what I was doing. Admittedly, flew a little bit less, still pulled missions, still was able to actually do medevac missions that saved lives, but I was working with more soldiers. I went from 25 to approximately 70, 75, depending, on the week. And, it really gives you the opportunity to get to know people and work nitty gritty, get to learn some of the maintenance and see what goes on behind the scenes and have an appreciation for what's done to get you into the air to do your mission. It's humbling because, again, you don't fly as much, but you're also doing a lot more on the ground type stuff, working with material, working with personnel, working with just strategizing how to maximize the actual output of your people and the maintenance that goes into the aircraft. So going to the career course, I don't know that anyone's touched on it yet. People talk about it being a preparation for command. It's teaching you how to be a staff officer and how to actually continue your career. And there are things that they teach you for command, but just expectation management, you go to the career course to become a captain and follow on. So not just command, but all the jobs that come as a captain. So following career course, going to Fort Hood, went to brigade staff, and that was my first time actually working a staff job. So that again was eye-opening and gave me an appreciation for all the times that op orders came down within our company at what we would call last minute, or just it gave me an appreciation for the different levels and hierarchies within the military that require so many different levels of thinking and input, and just overall, the think tanks that go into the product that finally makes it to the company, and like the quality of information that does come down and what is filtered out and what is added in. So following staff, went into the assault battalion, and very, very different mindset from the medevac. Whereas medevac, there's some planning that goes into it. There is, the information that you get that you have to work with and get wheels up from the ground and into the air within 15 minutes. With the air assault community, you've got days of planning. You're talking with multiple entities, the ground commanders, your commanders, and trying to make a plan that's as refined and specific as possible. And of course, every plan gets changed, but planning to plan is half the plan. And once you do the planning, it's going to change, but you have something to work off of. So it was a very important lesson in terms of being prepared and having something to build off of or even adjust. So lots of planning with the air assault and a lot of mission sets. It's not just doing air assaults. We did Bambi bucket operations where we did firefighting for the ranges, or at Fort Hood where things just get really hot and catch fire. There was also the rappel school. So we did a lot of air assault training with the school, which encompassed just orientation flights, which is introducing people to the aircraft. You're doing the actual rappel work with them. You're doing, point of pickup and drop off. It's pretty varied. Trying to think of what else we would do. It was interesting. So a lot of times you're moving equipment, you're moving personnel, you're moving, just you're doing resupply missions. There's just so many different mission sets that you can do with Black Hawk, and I think that's what I appreciated most. You can do the medevac, as mentioned. You can, I think Jenny's going to touch on a few others that I haven't touched yet, so I don't want to spoil the surprise and talk about those. But yeah, it's just very diverse. You meet some great people. And if there's a job that you don't specifically enjoy, then you just wait till the next one because you're probably going to love that. And there's just, a multitude to choose from, and really, really enjoyed it. So.
Awesome, thank you. And Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about what you did as a VIP commander and some of the other odd jobs that the UH-60 kind of does in our inventory for us?
Absolutely. First, I want to say that I do not have Chinook envy or Apache envy. I am all in on the Black Hawk. Love that thing. I think it's the best aircraft the Army has to offer. And if there is one word that can sum up my aviation career, it's versatility or variety. Just like Keri mentioned, there are a ton of things that you may not even think of that Black Hawks can do. And starting my career in Honduras enabled me to do a lot of those things. So a few of the things that Black Hawk can do, well, not necessarily in Honduras, although it happens sometimes. When I was a commander, I commanded one of a few command and control companies. So command and control means that essentially you have a stack of radio and communication equipment in the back, and you have an operator back there, and you oftentimes will carry the commander of a ground unit, so a brigade or a division commander, while his or her unit is conducting a mission. So then they have an aerial view, but they also can talk to any of their subordinate commanders during their missions. With that, you can also act as essentially a very tall radio tower. So you can retransmit messages. So oftentimes when soldiers are what we call over the horizon, meaning outside of direct radio contact, you can relay messages back to their home base. So that's something that I did from time to time. But when that's not happening, the command and control company is also lovingly referred to as the VIP company, meaning we have all of these fancy seats that we put in. We have all the bells and whistles to make the aircraft, although they are very old, look very nice, and we'll carry all the dignitaries that come from around the world to visit Fort Riley or, you know, Bagram, Afghanistan, which is the last place that I did that. Aside from those more conspicuous jobs, you have a lot more that you can do. And I know, I'll say that in my experience, we worked generally right alongside with Chinooks. So I know that they do a lot of these missions too. So in Honduras, we did a lot of drug interdiction or vehicle interdiction missions, meaning you go in and you literally cut off drugs as they're trying to come into the U.S. You stop a boat or you stop a vehicle or something, and then you let the Special Forces team do their thing and get those guys. We did a lot of overwater operations to include deck landings. So I worked a lot with the Coast Guard and the Navy to go run missions off of ships, which essentially extends your reach out into the ocean. Like Keri, we did a lot of parachute and rappelling operations with the ground guys, especially in Honduras, because you can't really get C-130s and they still have to jump. One of the things I like the most about my time as an aviator is the ability to do humanitarian aid missions. So in Honduras, we did a lot of medical outreach missions where we would go and pack up a bunch of doctors and nurses and head out to a remote area of Central America where they would set up shop and we would treat and educate the local population, thereby, just like Colonel Steele mentioned, endearing ourselves to the local population and making the American presence more palatable for the local people. We can also do forward armament and refueling to a lesser extent, of course, than the Chinooks, but Blackhawks do have the ability to add on external tanks. So you can extend your flight time to about 7 hours if you want to, and you can use those tanks to also refuel other aircraft. Did some border patrol, Bambi buckets, like Keri mentioned. Whenever forests catch on fire, you may see fire departments have this big bucket of water beneath them. Blackhawks do that as well, and other sling load operations. And then for one of my trips to Afghanistan, I was part of an assault company that had a QRF mission, so a quick reaction force, basically, where you would just be on standby, much like a medevac would be, except you're on standby to conduct an air assault. So in my mind, it was kind of the best of both worlds because you had the opportunity to go several times a night, but you also had the unknown, the surprise, the excitement of where are you going to go and what are you going to do. Yeah, and I don't know if you want to get into this now, but there are also opportunities in Special Forces in the 160th. They have Blackhawks as well. They also have Chinooks, obviously.
Yeah, we can briefly touch on that. We originally had a panelist that is one of the first female officers in the 160th. She couldn't make it due to an emergency today, but it is open. Special Operations Aviation Regiment is now open for women. I think they started that in early 2016. But the difference between 160th SOAR and like the conventional Army is that they have modified helicopters. So you have MH-47s, MH-60s, you have the DAP, which is basically a Black Hawk with a lot of armament on it as well that the pilot controls outside of their weapon systems that would be on a normal Black Hawk. And then they also have the AH-6 and the MH-6 Little Bird. So those are kind of the opportunities. And for assessment, it's pretty rare that someone's going to assess for 160th out of flight school because they're usually looking for some folks that have some time, some room in their timeline to complete the assessment and then still be competitive for battalion command with that. So looking for, I think what I was originally told, like 300 to 500 hours in the airframe for them to assess, but there's definitely opportunities for you to assess out of flight school. And unfortunately, I don't know a lot about the assessment. But if you do assess favorably into the 160th, you would then go to Green Platoon to get requalified and then into the mission it's set in the airframe that they picked you for 160th. Does anyone have any like better information on like what assessment in 160th looks like than me? It's always there. It's just new and shiny, I think, for women, and I think it's really cool. I'm pretty sure that we have women in every airframe in the 160th now, and it's new for women, but at the same time, a really incredible opportunity to serve in special operations.
Yes, so I'll add a little bit to that, mainly because I got to see the progression of it and turned down an opportunity to actually go to them earlier on in a maintenance test pilot role in their systems integration office. Just that it was bad timing career-wise at the time, so I wasn't able to do that. But that's why I went back and did the time with the SOCCENT J3. The nice thing about that was we were starting to integrate the women into, as I was leaving SOCCENT at the end of 2013, getting ready to take battalion command. They had already started the integration process of looking at who they were going to assess for the first women and starting to get it off the ground. So it was kind of nice to be on the inside track to be able to hear how all that was going. But going back to the assessment piece of it, the assessment is both mental and physical. So, and your ability to fly. And they will focus on your ability to fly and get to the mission sets on target, but they also are going to look at your psychological evaluation, your medical evaluation, and your physical stamina to be able to do it and to be part of it. It is a rigorous timeline that you do over there. You don't have your traditional deployments of 9 to 12 months, or for those that experience surges 15 or 16 months deployed. You normally do shorter windows to different areas of the world all the time, and you have to be prepared for different mission sets to be able to come up. So it does take a special kind of person to be able to be willing to do that and get after it. And I would, I'd say we have successfully integrated the community into a co-ed community as we've gone through, and I think a lot smoother than a lot of people expected, because of the people that were prepared to go and you understood what you needed to do. So it is something that as you go through as a commissioned officer, it is very hard to get in out of flight school unless you have been in the community as either another branch or enlisted, or you were a warrant officer and then came over. So those are kind of like going as a lieutenant is very, very difficult or you've had flying experience outside of the military. I mean, that would help in that case, but they're not looking for lieutenants. There aren't a lot of lieutenant positions over there in the actual aviation branch. Now, with that being said, for those of you that may be dual military, because that's one subject we haven't really touched, and there's a lot of dual military in aviation. And there's also the warrant officer dual military piece that is also a topic of discussion. Maybe could be held on a different day. but the other branches have been over there. Women have been over there in other branches well before the aviation women were over there serving. So, you know, you continue to do that. But some of the other things too is you have to be a strong swimmer. And if you aren't a strong swimmer, become a strong swimmer. The swim test is tough. And then you have the dunker piece of it. So you have to have the dunker training that is very intense over there. They have a phenomenal state-of-the-art dunker training facility too. So those are some of the type things you need to know. Some of the added mission sets for the special operations aircraft is the aerial refueling. The MH-47s and the MH-60s all have the capability to aerial refuel, but it is not always part of the mission set for every mission that they do, but it is definitely unique. And the actual for the MH-47s, the aircraft is actually built structurally different because they have larger fuel tanks. So the aircraft have to be slightly modified to be able to do that. So they fly MH-47 Golfs, not MH-47 Foxtrots. So, but that's just a little bit more add to it, before getting into anything that we probably shouldn't be having not currently being in the community. So definitely a topic for later.
Thank you, Colonel Steele. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about in the next 15 minutes that we have is kind of like what to expect in flight school. So when you branch aviation, you're not posting, you don't get a post night because everybody goes to Mother Rucker as soon as they graduate to go to flight school. So I got the breakdown from one of the folks that is in the 1st to the 14th down there at Fort Rucker, Alabama, and it's a little different than what I experienced 10 years ago. So when you go to flight school, there's not that thing called the bubble that they used to say, where you had a lot of wait times between courses and there was a lot of, you know, snowbirding and you had several months off to, you know, sit around and contemplate life before you finished your training. But now you'll go into Aviation Basic Officer Leadership Course Phase 1. So that's prior to any flight training, you're going to do that, and it takes 5 weeks to do the Phase 1 for BOLC. And you're going to be in with warrant officers as well, but they have warrant officer basic course part alpha, and that's only 3 weeks prior to flight training. So that's your first 5 weeks, and then you'll go to SEER school, which takes 3 weeks or 21 days when they sequence you in. And then you do what they call is Common Core, which is initial entry rotary wing. And you're either going to do that in a TH-67, which is a little baby bird that we all grew up on, or you'll be doing it in the UH-72, the Lakota, which they do have now. And that takes 22 weeks to complete, and it includes all of your basic flight training, whether that's primary, learning how to fly instruments, and then basic warfighting skills. And then after that, you get basically class ranked, an officer or warrant officer, and you get to pick your airframe, and you go into your advanced track. So if you're flying an Apache, it's going to be 19 weeks, and he told me that it's soon to be growing to 21 to 24 weeks to complete that advanced airframe. And then for the C-12, the Chinook, and the Black Hawk, that's 16 weeks for your advanced course. After you complete your advanced course, then you have to finish your basic officer leadership course Phase 2, which is another 2 weeks and 4 days after your flight training. So with that, there is a potential AirCav leadership course, which is 2 weeks long, that most students may receive after that, and warrant officers have a follow-on aviation life support equipment course that's 5 weeks and 1 day. So you can get through flight school in as early as 16 months with no hiccups or hangups in between the flight training, but it does take a long time. So your first duty station, you're going to be at Fort Rucker for probably anywhere from 16 to 24 months to get rated in your advanced airframe. So that's kind of what to expect when you graduate and go to flight school. And the second thing that I kind of wanted to brief, if anybody didn't have any other follow-on things about flight school, is, you know, platoon leader time and like what to expect when you get to your first duty station. So it's a little different because you're commanding warrant officers as platoon leaders as well as enlisted soldiers, and it's kind of a different dynamic in aviation than I would say in some of the other branches in the Army. So would anybody like to share kind of like what their experience was as a platoon leader and kind of the aha moments of what to do as a newly minted aviator in the United States Army at their first duty station?
Could I just say one thing about flight school really quick. You didn't mention Dunker. I don't know if they still do that, but Dunker do they still do that?
Yeah,
No.
yeah, they still do it. I think it's a prerequisite to primary.
Okay.
They've shut down the facility actually at Fort Rucker recently.
Oh,
So,
wow, okay.
There's
Okay,
yeah.
well, less important, but what I wanted to mention is that Dunker in the past and SEER School were often deterrents. There are these big, looming, scary schools that you have to go to that are challenging, and they will push you in ways that maybe you haven't been pushed before. However, what I want to stress is do not let things like that be a deterrent, because you can do it, and there is no reason. If you graduated from West Point, believe me, you can finish SEER School and you will do fine, and you can get through flight school, and you have the capacity to be an aviator and be successful at it. So I want to, although being an aviator is challenging and flight school is a lot of that challenge, I would say that do not let the challenge hinder you from making it your first choice if you want to fly.
Awesome. So did anybody have any like big aha moments about your platoon leader time? When I went to Savannah, I came in and I was 6 months, I think, out from going on my first deployment. And I came in as, I went on staff prior to going to my line troop because there were too many lieutenants and they'd plussed up the unit. So I got to my line troop in October, we deployed in December, and I had literally no idea what I was doing. And was really intimidated because as a platoon leader, at least in that community, you have, you know, your tracked and untracked warrant officers who have so much more experience than you. I started my progression in country because of like our aircraft deployment cycle versus when the people got there. And you know, you have to mentor them, and the warrant officers have more experience than you, and they've flown more than you, and they're probably anywhere from, you know, 2 to 10 years older than you, and you have to mentor them as well as your enlisted personnel in your platoons. So it was definitely something that I felt like I needed to learn a lot to feel confident enough in the credibility and respectability of the rank that I had and the position that I was in, even though I didn't necessarily have the experience that I felt like qualified me to be a leader in that position. So that was challenging for me to begin with, to have, you know, these 34-year-old guys that you needed to counsel and, you know, tell them what they were doing well, what they needed to work on, but also at the same time, they're teaching you. So it's definitely a unique, I think, community and an experience as a lieutenant, because you do have these people that you might have gone to flight school with that are brand new warrant officers that are starting on the same timeline as you, or you have the more experienced warrant officers that are your maintenance test pilots, your instructor pilots, your safety officers, and your tactical AMSO, I don't know, TAC ops officers that are in your unit. But I thought that was interesting. Is there anything that anybody wanted to share kind of about platoon leader time that they found significantly challenging or different or surprising to what they expected coming out of flight school?
So mine was, 25 years ago. 24 years ago experience. But here's the thing. The one thing that doesn't ever change, one is leading soldiers. Doesn't really change. I mean, the techniques you use changes, and how they respond to them changes, but also the knowledge that you need to have as an aviator. So, Annie talked about the, unique challenge and leadership challenge it is to lead the warrant officers. You also have that less probably in the Apache community than in the Chinook and Blackhawk community, but you also have your very experienced flight crew chiefs. But there's a couple of things, even if you don't get to be in, and this goes across any branch, actually, and maintenance, platoon leader positions. But as a platoon leader, it is very, very important. Having seen this as a battalion commander, most importantly as a battalion XO, company commander, and as a platoon leader, the best lesson I ever got taught as a platoon leader, and it was probably my aha moment, was understanding maintenance and what it was on the aircraft. And it wasn't just okay, I know that this is a 25-hour inspection, which you'll learn what those kind of things are for your airframes as you go. But it was the fact that I got out and did it. The enlisted, I stood next to my platoon sergeant, made me do all the maintenance with our soldiers, which was good. At first, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what he was doing. You know, hey, this isn't my job. It was what was important about it being my job was when the commander said, we need to go do this mission, I knew what aircraft could do it. I scheduled my own aircraft. I did not let the maintenance company schedule my aircraft. And that is something as you go through that you'll see it that, and as you learn in the aviation community, that's something very important. But actually do each of the inspections with your soldiers so that you understand how long they take, what it takes to get it done, and some of the challenges that you see, so that you understand your mission planning, because it really ties into the operational planning piece of, if you know you're going to have these inspections coming up while you are on a mission or while you were deployed somewhere, you are able to budget that time in at the platoon time. And you can also budget the actual usage of your personnel much better. So you know which pilots you're going to need, where you're going to know if you need an instructor pilot or a maintenance test pilot, or if you're going to need an extra pilot to fly with that maintenance test pilot. So it's something that I've seen over the years of our deployments of back-to-back and getting tired, and kind of being aviation is still very high demand, will continue to be high demand. I see it up here working at headquarters DA, but you've got to take that extra time. Aviation lieutenants is a much, well, some of my other branch people would probably disagree with me, but you're much more challenging in the fact that not only are you being a leader, but you also have to learn to be an aviator, but you also have to be a mission planner and balance those things. And you have the unique experience of having your warrant officers, and they will push you and they will challenge you, as so will your senior NCOs that have been doing this longer. You know, I've done that, it didn't work, but you have to learn how to be good at change management and understanding, you know, how to get people to look at things a little bit differently. So so my aha moment, my battalion commander used to make us memorize our maintenance. You had to know how many write-ups were on each of your aircraft at any given time, and he would ask you in the commissary. So that was my aha moment. And I luckily had it tucked in my, well, we had the big green flight suits at the time, so I had it tucked in my little leg pocket. And I whipped it out with I had 8 aircraft, actually, 8 Chinooks as a platoon leader. I had all 8 of them with the number of write-ups I had on it, what their status was, everything. And I got lucky because I didn't always have it. But he expected you to be able to know it even when you were in civilian clothes. To this day, I remember almost every single tail number and every single maintenance problem with that. I also remembered almost every single problem when I was a maintenance platoon leader in Korea of all the aircraft in our company, which ironically then, when I was a battalion XO, became the same aircraft that I had at Fort Riley as a battalion XO. So my soldiers hated it that I already knew the problems and what aircraft was going to fail and what mission for what program, because for whatever reason, it's hard to believe that a mechanical machine has a personality, but daggone it, you'll find that aircraft have personalities. And, you know, sometimes but your maintenance will be what you make it. If you want it to be, you know, you want to have 7 of 8 aircraft ready, you're going to have 7 of 8 aircraft ready, because in your mind, and you've said it and your soldiers said it, because they want to please you. And it's not you necessarily, but they want to do the right thing and they want to make the mission. No matter what people will say, when people get mad and frustrated about soldiers or warrant officers or even officers and lieutenants, they are always working to do the right thing. It's just a matter of understanding how you're getting there. So maybe that's a little bit of 25 years of experience, but it's very, very important to understand what you're asking soldiers to do. And it's easier to understand it if you actually put yourself in it, even if it means you're taking extra time and putting other things aside. Get the priorities and talk to your command and make sure they understand why you're doing what you're doing when. So that would be my advice from platoon leader, my aha moment, and a little bit from the battalion commander and battalion XO perspective too. Those are the lieutenants we really like. Those are your MQs. So Just a
That's awesome.
tidbit of that.
Thank you, ma'am. And I think we're running short on time. So quickly, Jenny and Keri, do you have like if you had one piece of advice for an aspiring aviation officer, what would it be to give them moving into that branch and field?
Just to summarize it real quick, the greatest thing that I would emphasize is to make the most out of every opportunity. Everyone thinks about being a line platoon leader, but you can end up in a maintenance unit and take that opportunity to learn the maintenance work with your guys and learn the ins and outs of the aircraft that you're eventually going to be assigned for. If you go to staff, take advantage of the the planning and the learning opportunity of seeing the different echelons and why things are being asked of your unit. So by the time it gets to your company and you have to explain to the guys in your platoon why they're doing something, you can tell them why in the bigger picture so they appreciate it. So everything's an opportunity, make the most of it. It's gonna make you a well-rounded leader. That's my piece. Without
Belaboring it, I will echo everything that Colonel Steele and Keri both said. I 100% agree. My favorite advice that I like to give that was something that was hard for me to accept as a lieutenant is you are in charge and there is a reason why you're there. Despite having the least flight experience in the platoon when you get there, you're still there to be a leader and believe in that. Look to your commander, look to your first sergeant, look to your senior instructor pilot for how to be a leader, because that's the most important part of your job. The flight skills will come and you practice them, but the reason you're there is to be their leader. So do that and don't be afraid to do that.
Awesome, thank you. And then my 2 cents would just be that you're going to branch into and embark upon a very extremely high risk, mission first, no fail environment. And it's going to be very challenging, but probably the most rewarding and thrilling experience of your life to be able to lead the men and women that make this machine turn to provide aviation to the people that really matter, and that's those guys and gals on the ground that really depend on our support. So coming into something that's really just so much bigger than self, and knowing that responsibility for you to take it seriously and give it your best every day is something that you just need to know going into it, and you're going to challenge yourself and really be blessed with an opportunity to meet some of our world's finest men and women in the process. So with that being said, I just wanted to thank Colonel Steele, Keri, and Jenny so much for talking through their experiences in Army aviation, and then also the West Point Women Network. If you guys would like to follow up with any of us and kind of talk about aviation stuff, I will make sure Jackie Jordan has that contact information for all of you. Thank you for listening and have a good day. Thank you.